Hello, good afternoon, and welcome back, everybody, to Webinar Week here with Beyond Pulse. Absolutely delighted today to be joined, obviously, by Mr. Mark Wilson alongside me, asking the questions, but to one of our resident experts, dear friends, Mr. Steve Fell of the Phoenix Rising. So, Steve, welcome. Thank you for sharing your Wednesday with us. Obviously, I will hand it over to you momentarily to do a little introduction of yourself and obviously the topic of conversation that we're going to cover today, which is really revolving around conditioning during, obviously, COVID-19 and the unprecedented situation that we currently find ourselves in. So really super excited to have you here and looking forward to all of the great insight that you're going to be able to share with the players and the coaches on the line. To the players, to the coaches listening now or in the future, just another reminder, in case you've missed it across social media, that we have been launching our Active Minutes project throughout the month of April to this point to try and encourage you guys to do as much as you can at home, away from your teammates, to own your lockdown and to come out of this time as ready as possible to return to play. A lot of that conversation is going to be echoed by some of the thoughts that Steve will share with you as we build through this. But if you're unfamiliar, please go to www.beyondpulse.com to check that out. But Steve, without further ado, obviously we're going to talk heavily around the conditioning, the sports science side of the game. But if you could, for the benefit of the people listening, please provide a quick intro to you, to your journey in soccer so far, and obviously why you're so well versed and able to discuss what we're going to dive into as we go through this chat.
All right. Well, great. Well, Tom and Mark, it's great to be here. I really appreciate you guys having me on. You know, that's a wonderful introduction. I don't know. I hope I can live up to it, to all the kind things that you were just saying. But my journey in soccer or football started as a player. I think like a lot of people in my current position. After, you know, I always was very interested in the physical side of the game because that's kind of what got me by, and maximizing those qualities. We went down the road of the exercise science route in a undergrad, from an undergrad standpoint. Wanted to continue to, you know, get better and understand the body a bit more, and then went to physiotherapy school. And then from there, I knew right away I wanted to get into the performance realm, I guess of preparation. Even though physical therapy is more so geared towards I guess an acute injury standpoint, the performance realm was something I've always been attracted to, especially as a guy that used to play. So that led me. I tried to do everything I could to kind of get my foot in the door, and was afforded an opportunity at a small Division II school at Flagler College, where I was the director of performance there for 2 years, and then had the opportunity to join the Houston Dynamo of Major League Soccer for 3 years, where I worked under really where I learned. I attribute that to a big piece of my learning. Paul Caffrey, the performance director there, is an unbelievable guy. And I always got to make sure when I give these types of talks that I give him the credit, because without him, I wouldn't be in the position that I am now. Unbelievable mentor, and learned everything I know from him. From there, I was able to do a little bit of work with the youth national team at the U19, U20 level. That was a really good experience, and still kind of in that network for when things kick off again and when time allows to go support their technical staff. And my current role is in my second year as a director of performance at the Phoenix Rising Football Club, where I oversee all aspects of physical preparation, all the sports science type of things, all the end stage rehab type of work, and work closely with the technical staff to develop, tactical periodization, however you want to call it, or to make sure that we're firing all cylinders come match days.
That's brilliant. Thank you, mate. Obviously, I knew all that. Willow knew all that. But for everybody listening, I hope what it does is provide a great insight into the depth of Steve's experience in the game, and obviously the insight and expertise that he has to share across obviously a range of different levels. Obviously, as you've heard there, including the MLS professional level, obviously the youth national team level, and now both male and youth teams at the Phoenix Rising. So some really great insight, and something that I'm really, as I said, really delighted that you get to listen to today. And Steve, thank you obviously in advance for some of the wisdom that you're about to share. Just on a real quick technical thing, I don't know if there's a tiny echo on your mic, so I don't know if there's anything that's a rustle, or you can kind of even just turn down perhaps the volume on your end. Just have a little play. There's just a small, if you're in earbuds, maybe.
How's that sound?
That sounds better.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. We'll stick with that.
Perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do to kick things off, Steve, throughout the last month and a half when we've been opening conversations, we've asked for people of inspiration or sources of inspiration to our guests on their journeys. Now, with yours, I want to go a different direction. I want to speak specifically to 5 fitness slogans or jargons that people may have heard that you think are super appropriate to the time that we're in right now, that will help us reinforce with the players kind of why it's so important that they are maintaining physical levels of activity, and they are kind of staying dedicated and committed towards being ready to return to play. So if there's anything that they might have heard, if you can just kind of harp on why it might be so important.
Great, Tom. That's a good question, and I think I'll take this conversation maybe to some things some misconceptions that people are hearing, but I don't believe necessarily to be true, or there's some just considerations. So basically, I will preface all these these 5 slogans with I think you need their expectation of what adaptation that you're after during this time needs to be known by not only the player, but also the coaching staff that works with the players, and to have that patience, because we're in an unprecedented time where it is going to be very difficult to overload or extend some boundaries when it comes to when we're talking about football qualities, and we'll get into more of that here in a second. But the first one for me is that to set the expectation is the more specific the training modality that you're using, the more transfer it is. So what does that mean? Meaning, if you play football, you're going to get better at football. Okay. If you run a marathon, you're going to be better at marathon running. If you swim or if you surf, you're going to be better at that. If you lift weights, you're going to be better at lifting weights. Now, I'll backtrack this a little bit, but what I mean by having expectation is, especially in the Northeast and throughout the country, I've spoke with several people who are in areas where they are just completely confined to their living room. And when that's the case, there's nothing that you can do that is going to give you a stimulus that is going to reflect what you're going to get in a football match. There's nothing you can do from that regard when you talk about overtraining. So I say that not to discourage some of these things we're going to talk about, but just to set expectations and to know that you're not going to be able to get a load that's going to simulate what you're going to get in a match strictly in your 4x4 living room. And I'm very fortunate here in Phoenix. Yes, we're on a lockdown, but it's open air, a lot of areas to get a run in, to simulate running, which is what you do in playing. I've talked to guys in California who you would think it would be an unbelievable opportunity to maintain some of these qualities, but they're on lockdown. Their parks are shut down, their beaches are shut down. So even in areas where the weather is nice, people are unable to get to get a load or to get a stimulus. Or the weather. I've talked to some colleagues in Minnesota who it's snowing, and on lockdown. So all these are challenges that I think are they're real challenges, and I think especially as staff, it's important to recognize and appreciate that and know that there is going to be some drop-offs when it comes to top-end fitness qualities, and that's okay. That is okay. There's no problem. In fact, the argument can be made that a lot of the kids especially have probably been playing year round. This might be an absolutely unbelievable time to do what we call a deload or have a break to kind of recharge the batteries and get themselves back to neutral. So that's the first one. But that, I don't want that to discourage people and say there's nothing you can do, because there certainly is stuff that you can do. But just setting the expectation on what you're after from an adaptation standpoint, I think is important. Saying that, maintaining some base qualities is easier than you think. Meaning, we don't have to do, say your typical, I'll use our team for example, our typical training week in season typically varies anywhere from 25 kilometers to 35 kilometers in an in-season training week. And the idea there is, as the performance guy and who makes the recommendations to the staff, and this is some education that we had early on, they don't need to do 25 to 35 kilometers every single week to maintain those capacities or that base type of work that's going to support all their other abilities to produce explosive actions in a football match. It's once you have it, it's much easier to keep than people think. But that all depends on the intensity, and that's the third one that I want to talk about. The intensity of your actions matter. So, meaning if you have the opportunity to do something outside, and you're prescribed a run, I prefer. Now, this is me. That people can disagree. I prefer that if you want to chase an adaptation and an energy system that is going to support a lot of different actions in a game, then the intensity of the run needs to be of high intensity. It needs to be slower runs mixed in with harder runs, and that needs to be cyclical in nature, continuous, and also throwing in a lot of smaller type of burst runs, because that's essentially what the game is. It's slow and then it's fast intensity running, slow, fast intensity running. So doing that for smaller bouts at higher intensities is going to, you can think about like filling up your gas tank when it comes to getting your energy systems to produce that energy that you need to support those actions. So that's the third thing. It's not necessarily the amount or the volume that you do, but the quality and the intensity that you do it, okay, is critical when it comes to helping maintaining these base qualities, because essentially when you get back onto the training grounds, that is going to allow you to support or get right into more quickly your more intensive activities like your 3v3s and your 4v4s, because you have the base to support those intensive actions. If you let that base slide down the rabbit hole, then getting into those activities right away when you get back is a risk for sure. But the closer that you can keep the base up, the quicker you can get to some of those actions that recover a lot of quicker recovery between the actions, which we know in football that if you can do a lot of those explosive actions in quick succession throughout a 90-minute match, that's pretty important. Okay, that allows you to expose players and keep them under pressure throughout the game, which is critical when you talk about winning games, especially at the end of matches. So that's the third thing is intensity. The fourth thing is, all loads are not considered equal. Okay, so we talk about volume is important. However, if players have put on a certain amount of volume and have been maintaining a certain amount of volume, say they're doing 15, 20 kilometers throughout the weeks, they've been doing that for 4 or 5 months, and that's something that's typical, that's fine, and that's good. But doing that on the pavement and getting the joints, getting your tendons, getting your ligaments, and getting your musculoskeletal system used to that type of pounding, okay, is quite different than getting a load on a bicycle, or getting a load in the swimming pool, or getting a load in the weight room. Okay, so I say that because, and it goes back to the principle we talked about specificity. You know, you're good at, you get better at what you do. You know, so, and the closer it looks like the activity, the more transfer it is. That doesn't mean there's not a place for these other modalities, but just understanding that because you've done the bike at a high intensity for 20, 30 minutes, that's not going to elicit the same adaptation that it is you being on the pavement running, okay? I know plenty of clubs that have supplied their teams with bikes, with Kaiser bikes, which is amazing because it allows them to get a blow, to touch into systems that are difficult to train when you don't have a lot of space. But they all know that it's not as good as getting onto the pavement and being into that, getting into, running mechanics and exposing your whole body, okay, nervous system, musculoskeletal system, to the stimulus of running. So while it's not, all those aren't created equal, it's still a good stimulus when nothing else is available, okay? It's just more of a general stimulus that's gonna give you some peripheral or extremity adaptation versus those central adaptations that you might be after, that you can, when you're training specifically for a soccer athlete. My opinion. And then the last thing that I think is really important. Now you're probably thinking, geez, if you've touched on, what should we be doing then? If we even, especially in the Northeast, you can't do anything, as far as being outside. Well, this for me, and the focus that I've tried to get the boys here to really work on, is this is an unbelievable time to peel back all the fancy stuff and get back to basics and really start to hone in your foundation and what that develops your athleticism, which is movement competency. So we all squat, we all lunge, we all stand on a single leg, we move forward, we move backwards, we move side to side, we rotate, okay, we go up, we go down. Having the ability to be in a 4x4 space, have some resistance bands, have some of these things that are, I call them, they're not sexy, okay, and a lot of people don't like doing it, but you can begin to reevaluate and improve upon those foundational movement patterns, because on top of all foundational movement patterns is your movement, and all your movement that you do in a game is explosive and at high velocities. Well, one thing that athletes can do is that they can cover up some of those I call it deficiencies in movement because of the velocity and the speed they're going, and they're wasting a lot of energy to do so. And as a result, can, with fatigue accumulation, can lead to some potential risk, while they're under fatigue. So understanding that now is a great time to kind of peel back the onion, get back to basics, really work on these universal movement patterns that every human being has in their body, in their system, and really trying to hone that in to get yourself going, so that when you get back to the field, maybe you're utilizing some of your energy stores a little bit better and more efficiently, because you're not wasting energy, you're moving more efficiently. And for me, that's been the big focus, is even though those movement patterns are in the weight room that might look more general in nature and might not look like the game, it 100%, I believe, for sure has carryover to help support what football looks like. And people will argue that all day long, but I am a firm believer that if you can start with that foundation, especially at a young age, from a movement competence standpoint, it's going to pay dividends down the road when it comes to playing.
Yes, Steve, I mean, we could probably go back into that first 15 minutes and have the next hour just trying to unpack a lot of what the wonderful advice was in that. Firstly, thank you, and to the players especially that are listening. I hope there's a lot of that really kind of resonated with you. I'm just going to stay on that last point, because I think, Willow, we obviously had Gaz Barker on a couple of weeks ago, and speaking about the concept of being physically robust and understanding that as you age up and the club players on the line that might have collegiate aspirations, and the collegiate players that might have professional aspirations, the capacity for your body to be able to handle the demands of the game, that's something that's so critically important. And maybe, Steve, as what you're saying, that the physical literacy skills, that the foundational or functional movement skills that some people just breeze past, actually underpin whether or not you're going to be able to sustain the impact of 4, 5, 6, 7 day a week participation as you move forward. And I just think that's a super important part that links nicely. Again, we've spoken to the coaches about the iceberg effect and what you see performance at the tip of it and you don't see everything else that goes in. This is another great example of the stuff that goes into allowing you to fulfill your potential and perform at your optimal levels. So thank you for that one, Steve. I didn't expect that, but it really is a great point. If I don't know if it's possible outside of that last point, is there something, if you were to speak directly to the players that are listening right now, to say, look guys, here is 1 or 2 things that you absolutely should be trying to do if you do nothing else at all, in addition, obviously, seemingly to that the movement competency stuff, like what would it be? Because you've spoken about, okay, granted, if we're running and we can go box to box and we've got a park that's open, great. But if we haven't, and it's getting outside just to run a little bit, is a spin bike better than nothing? Like, where could you go with, hey, like, try to make sure that at the very least you do this and this? And you're currently muted if you want to just knock yourself off.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I'll just use the example that here with the guys. For me, it's really, really important that the boys, get a longer run in. Okay, get a longer run in so that they are keeping their system kind of accustomed to some sort of load that's going to replicate what they're going to see on the field, even if it's of a lower intensity. I'm okay with that because it's just the overall volume. And then the other thing is that I'm really big on is, can they maintain some intensity of high speed running? Okay. And you alluded to box runs. And for me, that is because of the prevalence of, hamstring injury. We'll just use that as an example. It's sprinting tends to be running at high intensity, running with intensity. If you're not ready for it, is a risk factor. And, if there takes a certain amount of time to build up to that. So the guys have done a great job up until the point where we had to be, done with training on March 17th of kind of hitting a certain amount of meters every week, at a certain, they would hit 90% at least a little bit, to touch the week leading into games. So we've tried to continue to do that. Lower the volume of the amount of meters per week, but at least have a quality, which when I say quality, I'll use quality and intensity kind of synonymous. Okay. They have the ability to at least hit their max velocities of above 90%, and accumulate a fair amount of distance. Okay. Not nearly as much as what we would do on a training day, but at least tick them over. Between 80 to 85% of what they would do to give them a base to support some of that high intensity running. So if you're fortunate to be out in the field, a long run to handle it, and then some harder runs to prepare yourself to run at higher intensity for shorter bouts.
And is there just for these guys, you say longer, what does longer mean? Is it 3 miles, 5 miles, 7 miles? Like, obviously we're saying you're not trying to do 7-minute miles. If we're going to 6, 7, 8 mile runs, you're not going to be looking to do that at max pace. But just if you could put some numbers and some volume on that would be great.
And so Tom, Mark, you got, the product Beyond Pulse allows the players to do this. I would say instead of for distance, why don't you do time? Okay, working at a heart rate, So a 140 to a 150 to a 160, 140-ish heart rate, okay, is going to allow you to build some adaptation, okay, 140 to 160. And I would do that for, I'll give you an example. We started the guys off doing 2 times 10 minutes with a 2-minute rest period in between, where they had to keep the heart rate between 140 and 160. And no matter, some days they were feeling great, they wanted to go faster, but they know that that's not what we're after on that day, so they stay there. Sometimes they're not feeling so good, and their distance is going to be shorter, and their heart rate is going to be elevated as a result of that accumulation of fatigue. But it's okay, because they're still exposing themselves to that adaptation, to those parameters with the heart rate. And I think that's a great way to go about it, because everybody is going to be coming from at different levels. To ask one player to do a certain distance and another player to do a certain distance might be 2 completely separate stimulus, which I think, when you don't know where a player is coming from or where they are on that specific day, can be sometimes risky for a player. So I think, depending on the day, 2 by 10 minutes to start, 140 to 160. Okay, see how far you can go, staying within those parameters. That would be my recommendation.
It's different level.
Can I chime in? In terms of working with what you got, Steve, as you mentioned, and I'll be a little bit subjective here. I don't have a lot of room out in the backyard, and I have a little bit of a longer driveway to the side. Now, sometimes I haven't got the length for a beat test, so I get a beat test on my phone, and I'll condense it. So I'll do half. Instead of 20 meters, I'll do 10 and try and get to the beat with more turns in. The reason I like that, it's a straight up psychological. Can I push myself? Can I beat the score I got 2 days ago? So let's say I want to do 2 a week. Sounds crazy. It's a beat test. Normally you do 2 a year, but I like that element of the psychological push to, can I improve? Now, obviously, the volume of twists and turns in terms of load, you've got to be very, very careful with. And the other thing I like to do is work with a ladder. So ladder work, if you do it consistently for a minute and a half, 2 minute, working recovery, whether it's juggling, TheraBand, squats, whatever it might be, I find that type of work is more relative to the game, but it's also, you can get as creative as you want. If you don't have a ladder, players at home, like, get a marker, get some chalk, nick your mum's flower out the cupboard, and there's ways that you can get creative and put things on the ground where you can actually use your imagination a little bit and still do work. As Steve said, that's relative to the movements, explosive movements, and types of actions that you're gonna have when you get back out on the field. So where would you stand on doing something like a condensed beat test if you haven't got a lot of space, or ladder work? What do you think?
Mark, that's a really, really good point. And I think as long as you apply principles to that, it's an excellent way to build aerobic power, which is going to supplement your capacity work. But the key there with that is you might do 2 by 10 minute runs, but doing an activity where you're going at a high intensity and you're doing massive amounts of accelerations, decelerations, changing of direction, you're not going to do that for 10 minutes straight, right? Okay, because the demands are just going to be so much more on the body. But the beauty about that is now the intensity is higher with your activity. So as a result, we lower the amount of time that we do it. And that's going to give us a very good stimulus, okay, specifically to help us recover quicker between actions if you start to manipulate some of that work rest. Let me give you an example. You might have a space that you're talking about. You might set some cones up where you got to do a little slalom in and out. You stop the ball, you do an acceleration down and back, you get the ball up, you slalom back, you do the same thing back and forth. You might do something like that for 3 to 4 minutes, maintain a good intensity above 80% for that amount of time, and then take a rest. Well, now you've just chased some aerobic power and capacity work. You just inputted that into the system, which is awesome. You've just made it a little bit more game-like because you're on the ball. Sure, you don't have any opposition, but I'll argue that as well. You're still going through movement patterns that are relative to a footballer, which is critical. We talked about movement competency earlier on. And then also it's shorter in time. Okay, so you don't have to spend your whole afternoon trying to get your workout in. Okay, that's the beauty of some high intensity training or HIIT training that you're kind of describing, that you can utilize the ball to set up some obstacle courses to be able to get that type of stimulus. I think it's awesome. The thing to remember there is that you're not doing it for 10 minutes. Okay, you're doing it for shorter bouts, higher intensity, and then you're going to rest. Now, to an example would be, you might set up a little obstacle course, and you might do a 2 to 3 minute bout, over 80-85%, and then you rest for the same amount of time that you work. Okay, and then you might do 2 to 3 reps of that. Okay, well, you've just accumulated close to 10 minutes, which is great. And then as that becomes monotonous, or if you feel like you're not getting the same response to that training, you might challenge yourself. You might drop it down to the rest period might drop, between the reps, and that's going to still give you a stimulus that's going to force the body to recover quicker between each bout. So the challenge for you guys would be can you maintain the same level of intensity? Okay, meaning rounds that you go through your obstacle course. Okay, decrease the rest time between the reps, and can you still maintain that? And if you're doing that, then you know that you're getting a positive adaptation. And if you're dropping in the level, well, then that's probably enough for the day. Okay, because it's always about quality, and you don't want to sacrifice the quality during this time. In my opinion, you don't want to sacrifice the quality of your movements just to get work in. Okay. Once the quality drops, you know that you've stressed the system enough where you can recover well and get an adaptation.
Steve, thank you for that. I think you just captured such a really important point that the players maybe don't acknowledge the importance of often enough, which is obviously the concept of quality work versus just simply putting in work. There's a difference between quality and quantity of work that's done. So to everybody as a player that's listening right now, and all the coaches, I think echoing that sentiment with people is critical right now, right? When we talk more on a broader coaching perspective of, if the quality drops, then we're not preparing to be better, right? If we're just practicing poorly, that's not going to help us excel. So let's keep the quality of what we do at the highest level possible. And obviously, as an individual, from a physical perspective, that's a great point to add. I want to just go quickly, Steve, to the direction of obviously your background within the MLS, and obviously now with the Phoenix Rise and the USL. The coaches on the line will have spoken to their players sometimes till they're blue in their face, and the players will have heard their coaches sound like a broken record sometimes about understanding what it takes to do it at the next level, understanding the commitment and the sacrifice and the physical proficiency that's necessary. And Willow, you speak about all the time the standards that you hold yourself to, and I think we spoke a few weeks ago about the simple things are the easiest to do, but they're also the hardest to get right, because they're the easiest to mess up, right? The diet, the nutrition, everything like that, to allow you to meet the demands of what a regular training week would look like. So for everybody that might think that they're doing enough with a day or two a week right now, could you just speak to what the type of program is that the first team are doing with you guys, and how often they're training, without being super specific, just an idea for these guys of what regular days look like for the pros right now?
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a really good point, and I think just to touch on that, and Willow's certainly been through this. It's not easy. It's not easy, and the guys who evolve in their career. Sorry about the dogs there. Is that too bothersome? The mailman just walked by. Okay. Yeah. So the guys who evolve in their career, meaning they're open to suggestion, they don't know it all. They're open to extend their careers and get contracts, are the ones that make it. And the ones who are closed-minded, think they know everything, think they are maybe have an exaggerated opinion on their abilities, okay, are the ones that don't make it. And I know that, and Mark, you might be able to say, to chime in there, but the ones who are, that's my piece of advice, is the ones who are completely open to not only the footballing side of things or the tacticals that your coaches, but also little things like nutrition, little things like extra weight room work, extra supplemental work. Those are the, prehab work, recovery days, all of these little things really matter. And I know it's really, I don't know the age of everyone on the call right now. I know when I was 16, 17, 14, 15, I mean, nobody could tell me really what I could and couldn't do. I was going to work, and that was it. And I think that limited I think that limited me in a lot of ways, So I'll make sure that you bring up a great point, that, I mean, being open in all aspects to get just 1% better can go a long way. It can mean the difference of getting a nice contract, okay, getting into the college of your choice, having an amazing experience in the championship game. I mean, all those things matter. You don't forget those things when you get to be a little bit older and you're not playing anymore. So those are really, really important. Not to go off too much on a tangent, but what the guys are doing right now currently, they're currently doing, we started off because we didn't know kind of what we were preparing for. And we still don't know. We still don't know in games, but what it's looking like right now is a Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday schedule for the entire time that we're back, which is insane. And I don't believe that there's anything that you can do, physically speaking, to prepare 11, 12, 13 guys that play to handle those demands. So having the coaching staff acknowledges this, I acknowledge that. So the next question becomes, okay, it's about rotation. Okay, good. We got depth in the team. We have good rotation. What can we do to keep guys to recover quicker? What is that element? How can they recover quicker between each match so that our guys that score 20 plus goals a year can play in every game? And that is where this stuff becomes super important. So training habits become critical. And you talk about, I mean, these are not sexy. Sleep is the best thing. Going to bed at a certain time and waking up at another time is critical, to facilitate a recovery process that's quick and is going to give you the most bang for the buck. The other thing is fueling, okay, or eating, okay, or not eating, okay. So meaning, what do I mean by that? When you're in right now, a lot of you guys are in a state where you're not training as much. So, but that doesn't mean you starve yourself, but what you would be eating during a time where you're training 4 days a week, playing a game a week or 2 games a week, that's going to be a little bit different. So understanding those subtle differences on, maybe I need to not, maybe I don't need 4,000 calories today, and maybe I need 3,000 calories. So having a little bit of insight there and acknowledging that the activity levels aren't as high, so your fueling needs aren't as high. On the flip side, when you train, you have to eat and you have to refuel, because that's what's going to cause those positive adaptations that you're after, that are going to support your actions in a football match. So we talked about sleep. We talked about a little bit about nutrition, hydration. I roll into that as well. But something that a lot of people don't think about for me is the mental aspect of it all. And I think it is important and so critical for people not to isolate themselves, especially in this time. It's really important that you see each other's faces. It's really important to connect with people that maybe you don't talk to often, and stay connected. That is something that we have done here at the club a great deal. We have 3 Zoom calls a week. I do a hit session on a Zoom call, which is purely for the entertainment value. Okay, to get the boys together, to get some banter going, and to get the guy and just to have some fun. And mentally, that's been something that we've tried to recognize as being very important for the guys. So we we do that, and then we all get assigned players to call every day. Just to say what's up. It could be a minute conversation, but at least they know that we're thinking about them. So from a mental standpoint, that's where we are. From a physical standpoint, the guys are maybe doing because of the congested fixture schedule that we're going to be in. We've actually changed the way we're training a little bit, in that we're adding a little bit more volume to their work, because we're fortunate enough to go outside, because that's what they're going to need to handle. We know their intensity is going to drop because of they're going to play a full season and half a season. So we're trying to help them get a little bit more volume under their belts, so that they can support the amount of volume that they're going to be exposed to in the second half of the season.
And what is that, Steve? So what does a day like? Are they going 5 days, 6 days, 7 days? Are they?
Yeah,
when you say volume, what are they taking on throughout?
We do two volume days a week, where we'll use the analogy of 2 to 3 bouts of 10-minute runs at a heart rate intensity. We'll throw in a run there where it's more 20-second bouts with 30 to 40-second rests at a little bit higher intensity, and we'll do that for some repetitions. And then we do have a day where we're fortunate to have some mountains out here in Arizona. We have a day that they don't like, but it's really, really important that we get them up the hill, as far as not killing them for a mile, but we'll do a 10-second bout of them going max efforts up the hill, and then a walk down for a rest of, say if they're all going for 10, it might be, a 40-second to 50-second rest. And they don't like it, and it's different for them, but it gives them a blow in a different way that simulates running. Okay, it works on acceleration, which is an ability we're trying to maintain throughout this whole COVID, experience. And at the end of it, it makes them mentally, it makes them feel like they've just accomplished something that they're not used to doing. So from the physical side, the running side, that's what we do. And we do, we deliver, we have the HIIT session once a week, but we also have some things. We have one more mandatory lift day that they do at home that we deliver via an app. And there are a couple guys who are high performers on the team that like to do a little bit extra. So we'll give them a little bit extra, whether it's most of that will consist of movement-based type of things, based off of their individual profiles.
I think there's so much for me to dive in there, Steve. I'm trying to figure out where to jump in. I want to go back to a point, and Tom, you referenced it, and I say it a lot. Just because it's simple, it doesn't mean it's easy. Doing a squat is simple, but is it easy to build a habit of making sure you're continuously building your strength, your plyometric strength, whatever it may be? Simple. It's a misconception that it's easy. And developing habits is one of the good habits is one of the hardest things to do. Developing bad habits is really easy. That is an easy thing to do. And when you think about, you said something really important. All of this work can add up to a 1% increase, a 2% increase. And you've got to recognize what that 1% increase is. And for me, it was the occasions where, as you mentioned, playing 2 games a week, a ball comes over the top, I'm tracking a runner, it's 88th minute, you're hanging on to a win, and you get there. You manage to get there and block a shot, you get there and you win the ball back. That's the 1%. It's not glitz, it's not glamour. In some cases, it might be an assist or a goal you might score if you were one of those types of players. But for most mere mortals who serve the purpose within the team, that 1%, you've got to understand that all of this work just adds up to those small increments, and it's difficult to do. I'll reference one story that really resonates with me, and it's about Cristiano Ronaldo. Rio Ferdinand, I think, went round to his house after a game one time, and he knocks on the door and he goes in, and Cristiano's there, and there's 9 other people there. And he's like, Cristiano, who are all these people? I think he shared it on Twitter a little while back. He said, who are all these people? And he's like, well, he's my nutritionist, that's my masseur, that's my strength and conditioning coach. And he's like, now I get it. Yes, he's very fortunate to have all those people around him, But while other players are not probably recovering properly, going out to a bar or going out to a restaurant to eat, that's fine. He's thinking about recovering the best he possibly can, ready to train the next day, ready to play the next game. And we tend to see as players, and younger players tend to look at highlight reels, tend to look at the superficial materialistic aspect of the game, and we all get wowed by that. It's great, it's a spectacle, but don't underestimate the level of work, the level of best practice, of habit forming and habit building that these players go through, and their work ethic. It's relentless. It's something that shouldn't be underestimated.
Yeah, well, I think that's a brilliant point for everybody listening. That again, I'm going to do it because I like to drop phrases, but success leaves clues, right? And things like that. When people get their way to the very top, there's always a story behind it and how they got there. So I think that's another great example of that type of idea being seen. Steve, it actually leads nicely into the next question that I wanted to pose to you. Best case scenario, all the players are following their prescribed exercise routines. My club's very fortunate that we have a performance coach on staff. Obviously, you're at Phoenix Rising with the boys. Maybe there's other clubs in the country that aren't quite as fortunate, but say the players are doing what they're meant to be doing. Can you still speak to the importance of them acknowledging that even if they do all this, as you said at the start of the conversation, they're not going to be football ready, right? So when we get the ban lifted and we can all return to training and playing, there has to be an expectation management process that people go through to say, even if I've done this and followed this plan, it's still not going to prepare me for being game ready and doing it for 90 minutes and doing it back to back on a weekend. So can you speak to how long you would advise coaches and players to try to understand they're in a return to play process, right? So is that a week? Is it 2 weeks? And then to the players specifically, the importance of the regeneration work that they're going to do, maybe specifically around stretching, refueling. If you could just speak to those two things, because I think a lot of us are going to be so ready to get back out there that I'm concerned personally for my club and my boys that we're going to see a spike in injuries because our bodies aren't ready for it. So if you could just speak to the coaches about ideas of how they can adjust things, and then the players of how they can best prepare.
Yeah, no, this is a topic I really like to talk about. I think it's human nature for, when you have time off, naturally people, especially football coaches, a lot of, it's okay, we're rested, let's go, and that is the case. You're well rested, but being ready to handle the demands, like you mentioned, of a match or a training session is very different when you haven't done it. So like anything, you want to avoid excessive spiking, okay, and anything that you do. It's a basic strength and conditioning principle that I think applies across the board, especially when we talk about tactical periodization. It's a progressive overload, okay, so that you want to make sure that you are doing it in a step-by-step fashion to minimize the potential risk of that you're going to expose the players to. You asked the question, how much? Well, I think that varies. I think that varies depending on your group and your team. And one of the things that you can do is you can look back at your data, your Beyond Pulse game data, to see what you do in a match. And that can give you a reference point to understand, okay, we're training 3 days a week this week, and I just did a full game or over a game in my first training session back. Well, then that can tell you something about, that might be too much, because naturally the game is supposed to be kind of our biggest, stimulus, physically, emotionally, psychologically, all these types of things. So I think using your individual reference points based off of your game data is critical to help you ease yourself back into training. And then from there, you know, it's your training intensities from a physical standpoint, need to be what's called undulating, or if you can just think about a wave, okay, it's up, it's down. So you might have a low, high, medium, you know, type of day. And that's meant to, you know, initially when you come back, you're kind of priming the system to get yourself rocking and rolling and ready to experience something a little bit greater, which might be a higher day on the next training session. And then that higher stimulus is going to cause you to obviously to drop below your homeostatic or your baseline, okay? And then, you know, basic principle is you gotta let yourself come back to baseline to improve and to get yourself back. So, you know, waiving the training week based off of your reference point, which is the game, for me is critical, because, you know, if you hit first day back, high, well, you hit a game first day back, game second day back, maybe 3/4 of a game the fourth day back. Well, by the time you get to the match, you know, you've just done really 4 games in a week almost, you know, and if you play the game, it's going to be 4 games in a week. So that's really, really important. So this is where I think organizationally, if sessions can be planned out ahead of time, which I'm sure all the staffs do, but understanding what is the focus, you know, and this is where, you know, this is where I think it's important for a person who's in a position of a performance coach, has this conversation with the technical staff and understanding, you know, what's the style of play, what's the theme of the day, what phase are you trying to train today? And when you can understand that, you can prepare yourself to meet those demands. And I'll just use a quick example. You know, if we have a day that's in the attacking third, okay, and that's our focus, that day is going to be highly dynamic, small spaces, lots of changing of direction, okay, and a lot of explosive actions, okay. That's a high demand on the body. Backing that up with another day like that can be a major risk, you know. So, you know, how I would organize it or recommend the staff, and we have, you know, we've been working for, well, I have to say that the staff here at Phoenix Rise is amazing, and they've really bought into this whole idea of tactical periodization, or just really waiving your weeks so that you can maximize for that match day. Is, you know, you might have a lower duration session on the first day back that's of moderate intensity. Okay, and that might look like, you know, some bigger spaces, okay, with, you know, not durations that are going to overload players, okay. And then the next day might look like some smaller spaces where it's a little bit more stop and go, where you're overloading the qualities a little bit or overextending, you know, the players are struggling where the quality is almost dropping but not quite, and then they might recover. And then you might hit yourself into a tactical day where it's 11v11. It's more walkthrough. It's more pattern work based off of the opponent that's coming up. So that's just a very, very quick example of how you can kind of waive it. But understanding what your drills elicit really, really, really help guide that process. So I like to reverse engineer it as when you understand what the theme is, when you understand the phase of play, and you understand what the drills that the coaches like to get a certain adaptation from a technical standpoint, now you can start to plug and play to say, hey, this works well here, this works well here, this works well here. And at the end of the day, everybody's happy. The technical staff has got their content across, the performance staff, okay, have tied it all in. So you physically have got an adaptation that you're after that's specific to football. And hopefully you're fresh enough going into the match where you can let all these things come to fruition.
Yeah, so just to kind of clarify there, with the coaches, when they're going to be considering planning, make sure that obviously there's a conscious and intentional focus placed upon the number of players that might be in an activity, the time at which, or the duration for which the activity is going to go for, and obviously the space that you're working within. Right, so just if you've got to focus on 3 things, like always keep those at the forefront so that you can obviously make sure that the stuff that Steve's talking about is seen. Steve, just to close, I want to go from that back to just the second part of the question before was, can you speak directly to the players now on their responsibility to handle that return, right? So on their return to play, coaches, yes, we have to structure practices so we're not going to overload, we're not going to heighten and spike the risk of injury. But players, what can they be doing once they've trained or before they're training to make sure that they're eliminating the inherent risk that they would have as well? So speak to, like we said, stretching, nutrition, rest, regen, anything that you could talk to there.
Yeah, everything, Tom, everything that you just said, is important, and I think as a player, again, I'll go back to that, we talked about earlier about taking on the responsibility of being 1% better, or taking on the responsibility of having an open mind, and doing the little things that are not sexy, that nobody sees on a consistent basis. Those things like sleep, those things like refueling, those things like, not going out after a training session and doing 3 hours worth of extra work. Okay. If you're concerned about your fitness, asking your staff, hey, can I do a little bit extra? Can you give me a plan to do this micro dosing of, across the cycle to kind of get me back up to where I need to go, if you're feeling that you need that? Having those conversations are critical, and then taking action on those things that you can control, that being your sleep, that being your nutrition, and then the preparation, as a fitness guy, warm up. I believe in a warm up. I think a warm up is really important. So going through, I think the biggest thing as a player, players are very quick to want to just get through the warm up to get into the session. Well, the warm up is part of the session, and the warm up is a 20-minute piece that allows you the opportunity to get better in a lot of ways. Okay, whether that is in technique, whether that's movement competency, whether that is the ability to handle some decelerations and force absorption. That's an opportunity to get better, and people don't think about that. And I constantly, try to remind the players that, when the session starts, they're locked in. And of course, we can have a laugh and this, that, but it's we're ready to go. And I have to say, we have a great group here that knows that, and that takes advantage of those 20 to 30 minutes that they're with to try and get better. Whether that is, if we're in a passing drill, every player is demanding of each other. If there's not half-yard control, somebody's saying something to that guy. If a player is not going at the intensity that the drill requires, somebody's saying something to encourage that player to get going. So those are my big ones. Is that, I think, take anything away from that, control your controllables, and come with the right mentality to get better right away when that whistle blows, and it starts with the warm up.
Just want to touch on that there, Steve, just really quickly, Tom. I'm so glad you brought up warm up. Whenever I look at active participation and I segment the pieces of my practice, the first place I go to is, what was the application? What was the attitude like towards the warm up? Because that sets the tone for the remainder of the practice. Do you come out of the warm up focused to go into a possession activity, to go into something tactical or technical? And there might be technical pieces in the warm-up, but are you focused? Do you value the warm-up the way you should value the warm-up? Because that is your physical and your psychological preparation that sets the tone for the remainder of the practice. I'm so happy you brought it up, Steve. Critical piece for me, warm-ups.
Yeah, and not just trainings, but pre-game as well, right? So pre-games, it's critical, and often teams will see that the quality and the intensity in the warm-up will translate to how they play, for good or for bad. Steve, just if you could either reinforce this point or correct me if I'm speaking nonsense. But I think for many of the high school players specifically, what we're about to go through in the next month, 6 weeks, depending on where we are in the country, is probably going to be their first real shot of what a college preseason might look like, and the way that their body will start to hurt, just based on, we can do all of this, but as we've said, it's not going to prepare us. So I think players expecting that is going to be critical, right? Knowing that it's coming, so it's not a shock, is going to be important. And obviously, as Steve said, control all the controllables that you can to make sure that the impact of that is eliminated to the best of your ability. Because from what you've heard, there's no two ways around it. What we're not doing and haven't done for what will be about 2 months before we get back on the field is play soccer. And if we haven't been playing soccer, the moment we start to play again, our bodies are going to feel that. So I think for some of you, it will be a nice precursor to when your coaches say, you know, in preseason at college or even at high school, you're not using preseason to get fit. If you're trying to get fit in preseason, forget it, right? The time's gone. You need to be entering those moments as fit as you can possibly be to handle the rigors that come with it. But I just think it will be an interesting experience for many of the kind of mid-teen players on the line that perhaps haven't had this type of break to then go back into what may be an overwhelmingly heavy schedule. And coaches, speaking directly to you or to us as a group, we're going to have to do our best to make sure that we structure things appropriately to minimize the negative impact that could come with returning to play and being too excited about it too quickly. But Steve, I'm just going to close. There's a couple of questions. Ryan, obviously we can talk. You don't see the heart rate in real time when you use Beyond Pulse. It's going to be post activity, but at least you'll be able to get a sense once you can reflect on an activity that you've done or a session that you've recorded. You can go back in, look where you were from a heart rate perspective and see if you need to alter or tweak things the next time you go. And then Steve, just to Avery, she's been brave enough to jump up. Obviously, you've spoken about the ideas of waves and varying HIIT sessions with longer runs. Again, totally appreciate this. This is very general and you don't know the specifics of the demographic. But if you had to just off the top of your head propose a 3 or 4 day kind of running based activity plan for the players, how would you maybe taper it?
Yeah, so let's just do an example. I think that's a really good question, Avery. So the idea behind this waving of runs or waving a training week is no different when you're talking about running. So when we talk about running, when we talk about working out, you know, volume and intensity are what we call inversely proportional. And what does that mean? That means as one is high, the other needs to be a little bit lower. As one is lower, the other one can be a little bit higher. Okay, it's good because they're just two. That's a rule. Okay, that's the rule we try to follow. So the idea at the beginning is that if you're doing some volume-based work, or we can call it extensive work, all right, that's going to be a little bit less intense. Okay, but it's going to give you a good load or a good volume to your body. So I might do a long 2 by 10 minute run, you know, at the beginning on a Monday. And then, so I don't chase that same adaptation, okay, or do that same type of stimulus on the next day, because that is, you know, that's not that wave that we're talking about. I might do something that is of lower volume, so less duration, say 20-second bouts of higher intensity actions, like a 15-second box-to-box run. Rest for 30 seconds, 15-second box-to-box run. And then I'll take off the next day, because now I've just hit an extensive session, followed with an intensive session, and now I'm recovering. And then the next day, I might do something that it looks a little bit like the volume. It might be a mix between the volume and the intensity. So it might be maybe 3 to 4 minutes of work for 2 to 3 repetitions at a moderate intensity, all right, to push that envelope a little bit. And then on the day after that, I might work on I might take another day off, and then I might go on a day where I'm really fresh, work on some max velocity type work. So some sprinting type work where I'm really working a lot of intensity, short duration, but making sure that I'm asking the guys to expose themselves to that type of stimulus, because we know that is such an important piece when it comes to playing. So I don't know if that answers your question, Tom, or kind of gives a little bit of guidance, but that's kind of how I would look at a quick sample of what I would do in a week.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect, mate. Thank you very much. We are over an hour. Again, I think there's so much in that we could sit and try digest and maybe have 3 or 4 more conversations on, and maybe we will over the next few weeks, just so people get more specific on their needs as we get a little bit closer to returning. Steve, obviously, and listeners, I promised you a treat when we opened this up. I think you've seen there from the depth of Steve's answers and the range of conversations and directions that we've gone, that there's so much in that for you that I really hope you take the time to try unpack and digest. Obviously, coaches, we will do a summary of this conversation as well. If you have any questions and want to reach back out, Steve, where could people find you, and how could they kind of stay connected to some of the work that you're doing? Not quite sure. You're still muted, mate. I'm not. Do you want to just?
I told you I do that at least 2 or 3 times every time I'm on these. I just put my email right into the box, and then also selfless plug here. But this is the website that I do some consulting. That's the website where you can if there's questions regarding the physical preparation specifically for the footballer, that's where I put some work and do some consulting and help some colleges and some high school teams and individual players along the way with trying to maximize physical qualities for the game. So those are two easy ways to get a hold of me.
Perfect. And we'll make sure, Steve, that when we do the summary of this and we post obviously the full recording on YouTube and stuff, I'll make sure that we loop those things in. So I'd say on behalf of Team Beyond Pulse, Steve, but you are Team Beyond Pulse, so it's on behalf of us. Steve, thank you ever so much for your time, for sharing the hour of insight that you have with us this afternoon. It was fantastic, and I think that the coaches that are still on the line, just so much wonderful information that we're going to have to pay really close attention to the closer we get to being back on the grass. But yeah, on behalf of myself and Willow, thank you. For the listeners now, we actually follow up. Mutual friend of both mine and Steve's, Ollie Gage, joins us tomorrow from Coach Tech Soccer. So we'll be looking at evidence-based game models and how to apply some modern trends in the performance analysis side of the game to impact what's going on a practice field and obviously come a weekend. And then we follow up on Friday with Tony Faulkner, ex-Manchester City, to speak more on sports directorship opportunities and moving into a business management world as people leave the game. So thank you for being here, and we look forward to you all joining us again soon. So Steve, over and out. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks for having me, guys.